Mom, why are you eating in the rain?
Leon said there wasn't room for me.
I send him money every single month. He's gonna answer for every dollar. You mortgaged Mom's house behind her back. She signed the papers. I managed everything. She was drugged after surgery when she signed. Now you explain it to Mom, I found your wedding ring.
I thought they'd taken everything from me.
The house is yours again, Mom.
No, son.
His mother had once pawned her only gold necklace to buy him a winter coat for school. He found out 15 years later from a neighbor, not from her. She never mentioned it. She never asked for anything back. Now, as his private jet taxied across the runway at Charlottesville Albemarle Regional Airport, Ethan Cole held a velvet box inside his jacket, a replacement necklace made by the same jeweler in Millbrook. He had planned to surprise her. He had no idea what was already waiting for him. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 3 years earlier, Ethan Cole had arranged what he believed was a perfect system. The private jet came to a stop near the terminal at 8:14 in the morning. Outside, the Blue Ridge Mountains sat calm and green against a pale Virginia sky. Ethan had seen those mountains more times than he could count growing up, and they still hit him the same way every time something in his chest loosened slightly, the way it only did when he came home. He fastened the top button of his jacket and stepped off the plane. His driver, a quiet man named Marcus, who had worked for him for 6 years, was already waiting beside the SUV with the door open. Ethan nodded and climbed in. "No announcement?" Marcus asked as he settled behind the wheel. "No announcement," Ethan confirmed. "I want to surprise her." Marcus smiled and started the engine. "She'll love that." Ethan looked out the window as the airport gave way to open road. He had been traveling for most of the past 5 months. London, Singapore, Tokyo, back to Seattle, then out again. It was the pace of his life, and he had accepted it a long time ago. But every stretch of travel ended the same way, with the thought of his mother in that house on Ridgewood Drive, and the quiet relief of knowing she was there. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to the last few messages from his half-brother Leon. Brief, cheerful, always ending with some version of "Everything's fine here, brother, focus on your work." Ethan had found those messages reassuring. He wasn't sure why a note of doubt had entered, now rolling in from somewhere he couldn't name, as the SUV turned south toward Millbrook. His phone rang. Leon's name on the screen. Ethan answered. "Morning." "Morning?" A pause, just half a second too long. "Your office said you might be coming through Virginia this week." Ethan hadn't told his office anything about Virginia. Just passing through. "Thought I'd stop by and see Mom. She's great. She's been doing really well." The words came quickly, stacked together. "You know how she is. Keeps herself busy. Is she home? She might have gone for a walk." Another brief pause. "She does that in the mornings sometimes. You know how she likes the fresh air." Ethan knew his mother had arthritis in both knees. She did not take long morning walks. "All right," he said evenly. "I'll see you in about 40 minutes. He ended the call. Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror. Ethan said nothing, but the quiet told Marcus enough. The Millbrook town limit appeared 35 minutes later. A green sign faded at the edges. The name of the town in white block letters beneath the county seal. Ethan had passed that sign 100 times as a kid, always going somewhere else, always coming back. The houses along the main road were the same as he remembered: painted wood siding, small front gardens, old trucks in driveways beside newer sedans. The town had not changed much. That was part of why his mother had never wanted to leave. The Cole family home was on Ridgewood Drive, a quiet residential street 3 blocks from the town center. Ethan had bought the property 11 years ago and renovated it completely. New roof, new plumbing, insulated windows, a proper heating system, to replace the space heaters his mother had relied on for 30 years. He had kept the bones of the house, though. She had asked him to. She wanted it to still look like the place she had raised him. He saw the gate at the end of the driveway as Marcus pulled up. The house looked fine from the outside. Fresh paint on the shutters. The garden along the front walk was trimmed. A late-season rose was still blooming near the porch steps. The security guard inside the gate booth looked at the approaching vehicle and did not move to open the gate. He spoke into a radio first. He kept his eyes on the SUV while he talked. Ethan watched this and said nothing. After almost a full minute, the gate swung open. A man in a pressed polo shirt came out of the side door of the house and walked quickly toward the SUV. He was about 30, no one Ethan recognized. He reached the window before Marcus had fully stopped the vehicle. "Good morning, sir. May I have your name?" Ethan looked at him steadily. "Ethan Cole." The man's expression shifted. He stepped back, straightened. "Of course, Mr. Cole. We weren't that, is Mr. Leon didn't. Leon didn't know I was coming," Ethan said. "That was the plan." He got out of the car. The front door opened before he reached the porch steps, and Leon appeared in the doorway. He was smiling, and the smile was generous, and every part of it looked practiced. "Brother." They embraced briefly. Leon's hand clapped his shoulder twice, once too many. "You should have called. I would have had everything ready. Everything ready for what Ethan asked pleasantly." Leon laughed. "You know what I mean? Made it more of an occasion." They went inside. The entrance hall stopped Ethan within 3 steps. It wasn't the house he had left. The furniture was different, sleek, modern, chosen by someone with aspirations and not much restraint. The wicker chair his mother kept by the window was gone. The side table where she displayed her church program and her reading glasses, and the small framed photograph of Ethan at his college graduation gone. The wall above the staircase, where a cluster of family photographs had hung in oval frames for as long as Ethan could remember, was bare. A large canvas painting in abstract blues and grays hung there instead. Ethan stood in front of it for a moment. "We redecorated," Leon said from behind him. "Updated everything. More modern. My mother's pictures. We put them in storage. Safer there." Ethan turned slowly. "Where is she?" "Like I said, she probably stepped it out for a walk. She likes the morning air. She has arthritis, Leon. She's been better lately. The new medication helps." Ethan looked around the hall once more. No sound of gospel music from the kitchen radio his mother had kept since the 90s. No smell of coffee or the molasses bread she baked every Sunday, regardless of the season. The house was quiet in the way that places are quiet when they belong to someone different from the person whose name is on the deed. A soft sound from the kitchen doorway drew his eye. Margaret Price stood there in her housekeeper's uniform, a folded set of towels in her hands. She had worked for Dorothy for 16 years. She was 60 years old and had known Ethan since before he had the money to hire anyone. She looked at him, and her eyes filled immediately. "Welcome home, Mr. Ethan. Good to see you, Margaret." She opened her mouth to say something else. Leon's voice cut cleanly across the room. "Margaret, the upstairs linen still needs turning." Her jaw closed. Her eyes dropped. She turned and walked toward the stairs without another word. Ethan watched her go. He had spent 20 years reading rooms and reading people before they knew they were being read. He had just read 3 things in the space of 30 seconds. Margaret wanted to tell him something. Leon had stopped her, and the reason was somewhere in this house. "I'm going to walk the neighborhood," Ethan said. "See if I can find her. She'll be back soon, I'm sure." Leon stepped slightly forward, not quite blocking the door. Why don't you have some coffee first? Catch up. I'll catch up with her. Ethan reached past Leon and opened the front door. We'll be back. He stepped out into the cool morning. Marcus was still at the SUV. Ethan walked toward him slowly, hands in his pockets, looking at the quiet street in both directions. Something was wrong in that house. He could feel it the way you feel the moment before rain, the air, just before it changed. Marcus, he said quietly. Drive me through every road in a half-mile radius. Marcus looked at him. We're looking for her. We're looking for her. They pulled out of the driveway. Ethan kept his eyes on every sidewalk, every corner, every bench along the way. The morning traffic was light. A few delivery trucks, a woman walking a dog, children at a school bus stop, no adults. He looked again, they were adults. An older man with a newspaper. No Dorothy. He pulled out his phone and looked at it. She had called him 3 days ago. She had said she was fine. She had said the weather had been lovely. She had asked about his meetings in London and laughed at his impression of one of his European partners. She had not said she was hungry. She had not said she was frightened. She had not said she was eating alone. But she never had said those things. Not once in her entire life. That Ethan realized with a cold settling in his chest was exactly what he had been counting on, and exactly what he should never have counted on at all. The rain arrived quietly, the way it usually did in the Shenandoah Valley, first a darkening of the sky that you only noticed in retrospect, then a cooling of the air, and then the first drops on the windshield, before Marcus had any reason to reach for the wipers. Within 4 minutes, it was raining steadily. Ethan kept his eyes on the streets. 2 blocks west of Ridgewood Drive. Then 3. Then the older stretch of road that led toward the town's community park, a flat 5-acre lot with picnic tables and a covered pavilion that had stood there since Ethan was in elementary school. The park, Marcus said, not asking. She used to walk there on Sundays when I was young, Ethan said, before her knees got bad. The pavilion appeared as they rounded the last curve, a wooden structure with a tin roof, its paint worn to gray, a row of concrete picnic tables running beneath it. Most of the tables were empty. A white truck was parked at the far edge of the lot, with a hand-painted sign, Community Lunch Program, free to all. A young woman in an orange vest was rearranging foil trays in the back, and under the pavilion at the table closest to the edge where the roof had a long crack that let the rain fall through, a woman sat alone. She was small and thin, and the gray sweater she wore was damp at the shoulders, from where the crack in the roof dripped. She held a paper plate in both hands, steady despite the slight tremor in her wrists. She was eating with the concentrated quietness of someone who had learned not to call attention to herself. Marcus stopped the car. Ethan was already opening the door. Mama. His voice came out lower than he intended, almost a whisper. She didn't hear it over the rain. He crossed the grass at a near run, his shoes, finding the wet ground, his hand already reaching for her as she finally lifted her head. She blinked. For a moment, confusion moved across her face the way it does when you see something your mind hasn't prepared you to receive. Then her eyes focused. Ethan, her hands went slack. The paper plate tilted. He caught it without thinking and set it on the table beside her, then crouched down to her level. His expensive suit meeting the damp concrete without the slightest hesitation. What are you doing out here? She tried to smile. It was a reflex, that smile, the one she had used his entire childhood to reassure him when things were bad. I wanted some fresh air. He looked around. The roof dripped onto the table beside her. The rain on the grass beyond the pavilion was coming down hard enough to hiss. Her sweater was damp. Her shoes, canvas, sensible ones he didn't recognize, were spotted with water. in the rain. I forgot my umbrella. She straightened slightly, adjusting her posture with the dignity of someone who had spent 40 years standing in front of teenagers and expecting them to sit up straight. I don't mind a little rain. He looked at the paper plate. Cold rice and black beans, a few spears of carrot on the side. Plain. Simple. He looked at the white truck. He looked back at his mother. How long have you been coming here? She didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. A woman in her 40s wearing the orange volunteer vest approached carefully from across the pavilion. She had the manner of someone who knew she was about to step into a difficult moment and had chosen to do it anyway. Excuse me? She addressed Ethan quietly. I don't mean to interfere. Please, he said. Go ahead. I run the community lunch truck. She nodded toward the white vehicle. I've gotten to know your mother a little. She comes here most days. Dorothy looked at the table. That's enough, she said gently. The woman continued, not unkindly. She's always very quiet. She always finds a corner out of the way. Sometimes she stays for a while after she eats, just watching the park. She paused. I didn't realize anyone was looking for her. I wasn't looking, Ethan said. I was finding. He turned back to his mother. Dorothy's eyes had gone to her plate. She moved one of the carrots to the side with the edge of her fork, with the careful deliberateness of someone who was trying very hard not to feel seen. Mama, look at me. She looked up. The woman he saw was not the woman he had spoken with on the phone 3 days earlier. Or rather, she was. But he understood now that phone calls were not the same as this. The woman on the phone had said she was fine. The woman in front of him had lost weight since he last saw her in person 6 months ago. Not a small amount. Her face was thinner, the angles of it sharper. The skin around her eyes was shadowed. Her hands resting on the edge of the paper plate trembled faintly. She had always been strong. She had an old-fashioned quality of strength, not the kind that announced itself, but the kind that just continued quietly while everything else changed. He had never in his life seen her look tired. She looked tired. When did you last see a doctor? He asked. Oh, a few weeks ago. Too quickly. What did they say? She met his eyes. Then she looked away just slightly. That I'm doing fine for my age. He didn't push it. He had watched people lie in boardrooms for 2 decades, and he knew the small, involuntary shifts in the face and voice that accompanied it. He also knew that pushing too hard too fast would cause her to close down. She had always responded better to patience than to pressure. He took off his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. She protested faintly. He ignored the protest. The volunteer cleared her throat softly. She never complains, she said to Ethan. She always thanks us every time. She says she's waiting for someone. A pause. I assumed it was a friend. Ethan looked at his mother. Who were you waiting for? Dorothy looked at the park entrance, then at her hands, then at Ethan. She said with the simplest possible face, For you. He stayed still for a long moment. Around them, the rain continued. Somewhere across the park, a bird called once and went quiet. The food truck's generator hummed. None of it seemed to belong to the same world as the sentence his mother had just said. He helped her stand. She was lighter than he expected. She favored her right leg as she rose, keeping her left knee bent at an angle that suggested real pain. He guided her carefully to keep the weight off it. You said you saw a doctor. I did. About the knee. She didn't answer. Mama, it's manageable, she said finally. Which was not the same as yes. Marcus was already at the edge of the pavilion with an umbrella holding it out over them both as they walked toward the car. Ethan kept one arm gently around his mother's shoulders. She was small next to him, in a way she had never seemed when he was growing up, and the smallness of her frightened him more than anything else he had seen that morning. He opened the back door for her and helped her settle in. She looked back at the volunteer who was still standing under the pavilion. "Thank you, Mabel," Dorothy said, "for the meal." Mabel raised her hand in a small wave. Something in her expression, in the lines around her eyes, suggested that she had been watching Dorothy for a long time, and that she was glad someone had finally come. As Ethan moved to walk around to the other side of the car, he glanced back at his mother through the window. Her sleeve had shifted when she settled into the seat. On her left wrist, just above the watch band that held her old analog watch in place, there was a bruise. It was dark at the center, fading to yellow at the edges, at least a week old. The shape of it was not the shape of a fall. It was not the diffuse spread of a collision with a table edge or a door frame. It was narrower, concentrated. The shape of fingers wrapped around a wrist. He stood at the car door for one moment without moving. Then he looked at her left hand, the hand she had just rested in her lap. He had looked at that hand his entire life. He had held it when he was small and afraid. He had watched her use it to grade papers, to knead bread, to steady a photograph while she hung it. For more than 30 years she had worn a thin gold ring on the fourth finger of that hand. The ring her husband Ethan's father had placed there on a November afternoon in 1979 in the tiny church on Route 7 that had long since been torn down for a parking lot. She had worn it on the day his father died. She had worn it on the day Ethan left for college, and on every phone call since. And at every moment he could remember seeing her hand in any context. The ring was gone. Ethan got into the car. He didn't speak. Marcus started the engine and began the drive back toward Ridgewood Drive. Dorothy sat very still in the back seat, wrapped in his jacket, watching the rain move down the window glass. She had not told him about the bruise. She had not mentioned the ring. She had not said anything about the knee or the food truck or the months of coming there alone. She was protecting someone, or protecting him. He had not yet decided which, and the distinction would matter. He reached over and took her hand gently. Her fingers closed around his, and she did not let go for the remainder of the drive. Leon met them at the door before the car had fully stopped. He came down the porch steps with his arms slightly open, performing relief, the body language of a man who had been worried. "Mama Dorothy, there you are. We looked everywhere." He reached for her arm as she climbed out. She allowed it. Ethan watched the way she allowed it, without leaning into it, without warmth. "I went for a walk," she said. "In this rain," Leon said, and then he laughed, and the laugh was designed to dissolve tension before it could gather. "You had us scared." Patricia appeared behind Leon in the doorway, immaculate in a patterned blouse, her expression arranged into something warm and slightly injured. "I was about to call the police," she said. "You can't just disappear like that, Mama Dorothy." "It worries us." Dorothy said nothing. She moved past both of them and into the house. They followed. In the entrance hall, Patricia put her hands on Dorothy's shoulders and began steering her toward the interior. "Let's get you warmed up. I'll make you some tea." "I can make my own tea," Dorothy said. "Of course you can, but let me, I'll make it." Dorothy said again, quietly and completely. Patricia's hands fell away. Ethan stood at the door for a moment, watching his mother make her careful way down the hallway. She favored her left knee, but only barely. She was managing it, hiding it. He noticed the way she kept one hand lightly on the wall as she walked, not quite touching it, a secondary balance she was trying not to need. He looked at Leon. Leon smiled. "She's all right. She does this sometimes. Does what wanders a little, gets turned around." Leon spoke casually, the way you speak about the weather. It started maybe 6-7 months ago. Little things at first, she'd lose track of what day it was, leave the stove on. We keep an eye on her. She seemed perfectly clear-headed to me, Ethan said. She has good days. Leon nodded slowly, the nod of someone generously conceding a point. She has good days and harder days. That's just what it is at her age. Ethan kept his voice level. No one mentioned this to me. Leon spread his hands slightly. We didn't want to worry you. You've got enough on your plate. She's my mother, Leon, and she's here and she's fine and I've been watching over her. A slight tightening at the edges of his smile. That's what you asked me to do. Ethan let that sit for a moment, then nodded once. Show me her room. She's in the kitchen. Her room. A pause. Just barely a pause. Sure, Leon said. Of course. He led Ethan up the stairs and down the hallway of the second floor. Ethan had grown up in this hallway. He knew every floorboard. At the end of the hall was the master bedroom, the largest room, the one with 2 windows that looked out over the backyard garden, the room where Dorothy had slept for 30 years. Leon walked past it without stopping. He turned instead toward a narrower door at the far end, past the utility closet at the back of the house where the hallway bent slightly before meeting the back wall. He opened the door. Ethan stood in the doorway and looked in. The room was small. It had been used for storage when he was a child. Boxes of old textbooks, his father's fishing equipment, holiday decorations. Now it held a twin bed, a small dresser and a narrow window that looked out at the side fence, and a strip of the neighbor's yard. A plug-in space heater sat on the floor beside the bed. The ceiling had a water stain in the corner from an old leak that had never been properly repaired. He looked at the space heater. He looked at the water stain. He looked at the single window. What happened to her bedroom, he asked. This is her bedroom now, Leon said. She actually chose it herself. Said the big room was too much upkeep. She wanted something smaller. Something smaller. Ethan looked at the twin bed. She slept in a king-size bed for 30 years. People's needs change. Leon shrugged. Elderly people often prefer smaller spaces. It's a comfort thing. Ethan said nothing. Patricia appeared in the hallway behind them. She carried a mug of tea, whether she had made it or retrieved it from elsewhere. Ethan didn't know, but its timing was suspiciously good. Here, I'll bring this to Mama Dorothy. She moved past both of them and knocked gently on the narrow door before going in. Ethan walked back down the hallway. He stopped in front of the door to the master bedroom. He opened it. The room had been redecorated. A different bed, taller, heavier, a 4-poster with white linens, a different dresser. Clothes he didn't recognize hanging in the open closet door. On the bedside table, a charger, a glass of water, reading glasses that were not his mother's. He closed the door and went downstairs. Margaret was in the kitchen washing a single cup at the sink. Dorothy was no longer there. Ethan assumed Patricia had taken her upstairs. He stood in the kitchen doorway and watched Margaret until she looked up. Her eyes told him what her voice couldn't say in this room. Her chin lifted almost imperceptibly toward the back of the house, toward the garden. He nodded. Once. She turned back to the sink. Ethan went to the living room and sat with his phone scrolling through nothing while Leon appeared and made conversation about the property, the garden, a problem with the gutters that had been addressed. Ethan responded in monosyllables and waited. 40 minutes later, as the rain slowed and a gray afternoon light came through the windows, Ethan excused himself, said he wanted air, and went outside. The garden behind the house was Dorothy's creation, or it had been. Flower beds along the back fence, a small vegetable patch that should have had its fall cleanup by now, but hadn't a brick path his father had laid himself in the early '80s, slightly uneven and beloved for it. Along the far edge of the garden was a small greenhouse his mother had built for starting seedlings in cold weather. Ethan crossed the brick path and entered. It was warm inside, humid with the smell of soil and roots. Margaret Price was already there, standing beside a row of dormant herb pots, her back straight, her apron still on her hands, clasped in front of her. "I'm glad you came," she said, without preamble. Her voice was low. "I've been wondering what to do for months." "What are you afraid of, Margaret?" She exhaled slowly. "Mr. Leon told me that if I ever contacted you or spoke to anyone about what happens in this house, he would file a complaint with the State Labor Board. He said there were irregularities in my employment record from years ago. There aren't any, but it doesn't matter. He said he knew people there. He said he could make it complicated for me." She paused. "I have 2 daughters still finishing school. I couldn't risk losing this job. And I couldn't risk what a complaint might do." "How long has she been in that back room?" 8 months. Margaret's voice was steady. He told her the master bedroom needed repainting. She waited. The painting never happened. And the money. She gets an allowance, cash in an envelope, $150 a month. I've seen her use it mostly for medicine. She can't always afford the full prescription. She splits the pills sometimes, half in the morning, half at night. She looked at him. "I didn't know you were sending money. I didn't know how much." She never mentioned it. Ethan was quiet for a moment. $7,500 a month. 4,500 miles away, trusting that the system was working. "I should have visited more," he said. It wasn't a full thought, just the surface of one. "You trusted your brother," Margaret said without judgment. "He's my half-brother." She nodded slightly. "He told everyone you were close. He showed people your texts. He used your name like it was his own." A pause. She asked about her documents once. About 6 months ago. She kept saying her important papers were gone, her deed, her insurance, her social security cards. She asked me to help her look. We looked everywhere. We couldn't find them. And then, after that, she stopped asking. Margaret reached into the front pocket of her apron and removed a small envelope. It was sealed, the flap pressed down with care. "She gave me this 3 months ago. She asked me to keep it safe and give it to you if you ever came." He took it. His name was written on the front in his mother's handwriting, the careful slanting print of a retired principal, each letter deliberate. He opened it. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. He opened it. "If something happens to me, do not let the truth stay buried. You will know what to look for. I raised you to know." That was all. No further explanation, no list of names or dates. Just those 2 sentences written in blue ink with the steady hand of a woman who had decided that preparation was the only thing she could control. He stood in the warm greenhouse, the smell of soil around him, and read the note twice. Then he folded it and put it in his jacket pocket. "Thank you, Margaret. I'm sorry I didn't find a way to reach you sooner." Her eyes were wet. She would never let me say too much on the phone. She said she didn't want to cause you worry. "I know. That's who she is." "I know," he said again quietly. "That's who she's always been." He slipped out of the greenhouse and walked back across the brick path toward the house. Leon was standing at the kitchen window as he approached, and he watched Ethan cross the garden with an expression that was entirely still. That evening, after Dorothy had gone to bed early and Leon and Patricia had retired to the room that was no longer his mother's, Ethan sat at the desk in his late father's study and opened the household financial folder that the estate manager had left in the filing cabinet. He had 2 hours before anyone would check on him. He needed less than 1. Within 20 minutes, he found it. A monthly expense line labeled Property Management Services paid to a company named Coastal Bridge Services, LLC. The payments were large. They were consistent. They had no corresponding documentation, no contracts, no invoices, no work orders. He kept reading. He found a second irregularity, then a third. Then he found a document tucked behind a stack of old utility statements, at the back of the drawer, its edges slightly bent, as if someone had placed it there in haste. He pulled it out and read the header across the top of the page. Durable Power of Attorney, Dorothy May Cole. The date was 18 months ago. 3 days after the date, he remembered sending flowers to his mother when she had her knee replacement surgery. He set the document on the desk in front of him and looked at it for a long time. He had sent flowers. He had called her the night before the surgery. She had told him not to come all the way from Seattle. It was routine. She would be fine. He had meetings. He had listened to her. He had believed that listening was the same as being present. He had not been in this room when she signed this piece of paper. He had not been in this state. He had not known anyone had asked her to sign anything at all. The study was very quiet. Outside, the rain had stopped. The house was dark and still. Ethan Cole sat in his father's chair with his mother's power of attorney on the desk in front of him, and understood for the first time the full shape of what he had walked into. He slept 4 hours in the guest room. The actual guest room, not the storage room, and woke before dawn with the kind of clarity that only arrived when something had made the path ahead completely obvious. He left the house quietly at 6:30 before anyone else was up, and called James Whitfield from the driveway. He had found Whitfield's name 2 years earlier during a routine legal matter involving a property dispute in the county. Whitfield was an elder law attorney in Charlottesville, methodical, direct, no enthusiasm for drama. Exactly the kind of person Ethan trusted. He gave Whitfield a brief summary. Not everything, just what he had confirmed. The power of attorney, the shell company payments, the home equity situation, which he had found in the financial folder the previous night, a $140,000 lien against the Ridgewood Drive property executed through the power of attorney, currently 3 months behind in payments. Whitfield listened without interrupting. When Ethan finished, there was a brief silence. "I can see you today," Whitfield said. "Come to the Charlottesville office at 2. Bring everything you have." Ethan came back inside and found Leon and Patricia already in the kitchen when he entered, coffee brewing, the table set. Patricia was moving with the efficiency of someone who had been awake for a while and was performing a normal morning for an audience. Leon sat with his own coffee and looked up at Ethan as if they were old friends catching up. "Morning," Leon said. "Sleep all right?" "Fine, thanks." Ethan poured himself a coffee and sat down. He set the power of attorney document on the table between them. Leon went still. Patricia at the counter kept her back turned, but became very carefully still in a way that meant she had heard the sound of paper hitting the table and knew exactly what it meant. "Walk me through this," Ethan said. Leon set down his cup. The performance was over and they both knew it. "She asked me to handle things while she was recovering. She was worried about the house and she couldn't get around. I was here." 3 days after surgery, Ethan said. She was on opioid pain management for 4 days post-procedure. The surgical center is very clear about that in their standard paperwork. She was lucid, Leon said. She understood what she was signing. What exactly did she understand? That I would handle things while she was laid up. Handle things, Ethan repeated, including taking out a $140,000 loan against her house. Patricia turned from the counter. Her voice was measured. Medical expenses add up. The night nursing after surgery. The physical therapy. Medications that aren't covered. I've been sending $7,500 a month, Ethan said. He watched Patricia's face as he said the number. It didn't change. She already knew the number. For 3 years. $90,000 a year to manage a 3-bedroom house in Millbrook, Virginia. Things cost what they cost, Leon said. Show me the receipts, Ethan said. Medical nursing therapy renovation, show me anything in the last 3 years that accounts for how that money was used. Leon said nothing. Patricia said nothing. The loan, Ethan continued. 3 payments behind. If it goes into foreclosure, my mother loses this house. The house I paid for outright 11 years ago. She would lose it because someone borrowed against it without her meaningful understanding. She understood, Leon said again. The repetition had a quality of desperation in it. She was on hydrocodone, Ethan said. 3 days out of a general anesthetic. Patricia sat down. She crossed her hands on the table and looked at Ethan with a composure that felt like the result of preparation rather than calm. Ethan, she said, I understand that this looks a certain way. But you've been away. You've been away for a long time. What you see in a weekend visit, that's not the same as what we've been living with here day to day. Tell me what you've been living with. Your mother, Patricia said, is not the same woman she was 3 years ago. She forgets things. She loses track of conversations. She repeats herself. She has been confused about finances since long before any of this. She asked us the same question about her electric bill 6 times in 1 week. She paused carefully. We've been managing something that's very hard. We've been trying to keep it from you because we didn't want to worry you. But you need to understand that the person you spoke with on the phone is not the full picture. Ethan looked at her. He looked at her for long enough that she had to hold eye contact rather than look away. My mother is a retired high school principal, he said. She administered standardized testing protocols for 22 years. She ran a department of 16 teachers and managed a budget of $400,000 annually. Last Tuesday, she described to me in detail and sequence a documentary about the construction of the Hoover Dam that she had watched the night before. He paused. She was not confused. She was exactly as clear as she has always been. Patricia held his gaze. People can have good days. She had a good day, Ethan said. 3 days ago, on the phone, and the day before that. And every time I've called her in the last 6 months. And she's been eating lunch from a food truck at the community park because she doesn't have money for groceries. Leon's jaw tightened. $150 a month, Ethan said. In cash. In an envelope. That's what she's been living on. That's not Leon started. I have a meeting with an attorney this afternoon, Ethan said. He stood, picked up the document, and tucked it under his arm. If there's anything you want to tell me before then, I'm listening now. Neither of them spoke. All right, Ethan said. He walked out of the kitchen and up the stairs to the guest room. He arrived at Whitfield's Charlottesville office at 1:50. The office was modest, 2 rooms, a paralegal, stacks of files with colored tabs. Whitfield himself was a compact man in his mid-50s with reading glasses on a cord and the permanent air of someone who had heard more than his share of stories like this one. He read through everything Ethan had brought the power of attorney, the financial statements, the pages Ethan had photographed from the household folder, the home equity loan notice without speaking. When he finished, he removed his reading glasses and set them on the desk. The power of attorney, Whitfield said. If she signed this while under anesthetic protocols for a joint replacement surgery, there's a significant question about whether she had the legal capacity to execute this document at all. Standard legal capacity requires a clear understanding of the nature, scope, and consequences of what's being signed. Opioid pain management in the immediate post-surgical period creates a well-documented basis for challenging that. Can it be revoked? With sufficient evidence and the right petition? Yes. We'd file to have it invalidated, cognitively impaired consent failure of the notarization process to verify clarity possible undue influence. He tapped the loan document. The lien on the property was created under this POA. If the POA falls, the lien's validity is compromised. The bank holding that note will need to be put on notice. How quickly can we move? I can file an emergency petition with the circuit court this week. The burden of proof is significant, but you have more than I'd expect at this stage. The financial records alone, he indicated, the photographs tell a coherent story. He looked at Ethan. The other issue is your mother's cognitive status. Your brother-in-law, half-brother, has made representations that she is impaired. If he tries to have her declared legally incompetent, we need to be ahead of that. She's not impaired. She may not be. But we need an independent evaluation from a certified physician to put that on paper. I know a geriatric specialist at UVA who does exactly this kind of work. If we can schedule an evaluation in the next 48 hours, Ethan's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. A text from Marcus. Mr. Cole, a doctor just arrived at the house. Leon let him in. The sign on the car says Marsh Senior Care Consulting. Ethan showed Whitfield the text. Whitfield's expression didn't change, but his voice went quieter. They're moving faster than I expected. He picked up his phone. I'll call Dr. Rachel Nguyen now. Ethan drove back toward Millbrook. The Shenandoah Valley rolled past the window in its late autumn colors, amber and copper, and the last green of the season before the cold stripped it. He had always found the landscape beautiful in a way that required no thought. Today, he couldn't see it. He thought about the note in his jacket pocket. You will know what to look for. I raised you to know. She had written that 3 months ago. Not in panic. Not in confusion. With the exact precision of a woman who had spent a career preparing other people for tests. She had known something was wrong. She had documented that she knew. She had left a trail for the one person she trusted would follow it. He pressed a little harder on the accelerator. Dr. Gerald Marsh was in the living room when Ethan arrived. He was in his late 60s, gray-suited, with the manner of a man who performed authority rather than possessed it. He was seated across from Dorothy, a yellow legal pad on his knee, and Leon stood near the doorway with his arms slightly folded, watching. Ethan stepped inside and took in the scene without pausing in the doorway. "What's this?" he asked pleasantly. Leon straightened. "Dr. Marsh has been looking in on Mama Dorothy. It's routine. He's a senior care specialist. I didn't know you'd arranged a doctor's visit." Ethan set his jacket on the side table and moved toward a chair near his mother. "Mind if I sit?" In Leon's voice was careful. "It's better if she's comfortable. Extra people in the room can make it harder to. I'll manage," Dorothy said from her chair. Ethan sat. Dr. Marsh adjusted his glasses and returned to his notepad. "We were just chatting. Mrs. Cole, can you tell me what month it is?" "November," Dorothy said. "And the year, you know the year, Dr. Marsh. So do I." A pause. "He wrote something." And the current president, Dorothy answered. "Correctly, completely." "Good." Dr. Marsh made another note. "And can you tell me in your own words what you had for breakfast this morning?" "Half a piece of toast," Dorothy said. "I wasn't hungry, because you weren't hungry, or because the bread was stale and I chose not to eat a full piece of stale bread," Dorothy said. "That's a judgment, not a symptom." Ethan kept his expression neutral, but he felt the corner of his mouth move. Dr. Marsh cleared his throat and turned to a new page. "Mrs. Cole, I'd like to ask you about some recent events. Do you recall signing any documents in the past year or two?" Dorothy's eyes went to Leon for just a fraction of a second. Then they came back to the doctor. "I've signed things," she said. "I'd need to know which things you mean." "Do you recall signing a document related to property management?" Perhaps when you were recovering from surgery, I signed something when I was in the recovery period," Dorothy said. Leon brought it. He said it was for managing household matters while I couldn't get around. "Do you recall the specifics of what it said?" "No," Dorothy said. "I was not in a position to read carefully at that time." Leon coughed once. Dr. Marsh wrote, "And how is your memory in general? Do you find that you sometimes lose track of conversations, misplace items?" "I am 71 years old," Dorothy said. "I misplaced my reading glasses. I also misplaced my glasses when I was 45. The glasses have nothing to do with the rest of this." After another 15 minutes, questions about dates, events, sequences, Marsh wrapped up his visit. He shook hands with Leon at the door. Ethan walked Marsh out himself and stood on the porch until the car turned off the street. He went back inside. Leon was in the kitchen. Ethan sat across from him. "Marsh Senior Care Consulting," Ethan said. "What does he actually do?" "He evaluates elders, makes assessments for families who need documentation." "Documentation for what?" Leon poured himself a glass of water. "If there's ever a question about capacity, about whether someone can make their own decisions." He turned. "For her protection." "Her protection," Ethan said. "Or documentation that makes her easier to override." "That's not fair." "What exactly are you trying to establish, Leon?" Leon leaned against the counter. The reasonableness was still in place, but it was strained now. "I've been here for 3 years. I've been the one who drives her to the grocery store when she doesn't feel safe driving. I've been the one who calls the plumber and handles the property taxes and coordinates the home repairs. You've been sending a check." "I've been sending a significant amount more than a check," Ethan said. "And I've been spending it. On her. On this house. On keeping things running the way you'd want them run if you were actually here. Where are the receipts?" "People don't keep receipts for 3 years of." "I do," Ethan said. "My company does. Every expense is documented. Because documentation is how you prove what the money was actually for." The silence that followed had a different quality than the earlier ones. This was not the silence of someone measuring their next calculated move. It was the silence of someone who had run out of corridor. Patricia appeared at the kitchen doorway. She assessed the room immediately, the way she always did, the way that made her the actual architect of everything Leon had executed. "We should all take a breath," she said. "This isn't a comfortable conversation, but it doesn't have to become hostile." "It's not hostile," Ethan said. "It's a question about where $270,000 went." Patricia sat down. When she spoke again, her voice had changed softer, careful, calibrated for sincerity. "Ethan, I understand why this looks alarming. I do. But there are things you don't know. Your mother's needs have been significant. Medical care is expensive. The property has had real issues: the roof last spring, the HVAC system, the water heater the winter before that. We've done our best with what was available. Show me the contractor invoices." A silence. "The receipts from the roofing company," Ethan said. "The HVAC service record. The water heater installation invoice. Any of it." Patricia looked at Leon. Leon looked at the counter. "I'm going to visit my mother," Ethan said. He stood. "And tomorrow morning, I'm going to call my attorney and begin the process of having the power of attorney reviewed by the court." Patricia's face for the first time changed in a way that was not controlled. It was very brief, less than a second, but he saw it. He went upstairs. Dorothy was not in the storage room. She was sitting at the small desk in the upstairs hall, landing an old writing desk his parents had used for letters pushed against the wall between the bathroom and the back room door. She had a pen in her hand. When she heard Ethan's step on the stairs, she covered what she was writing with a folded sheet of paper. He didn't mention it. He sat in the chair beside the desk. "How long has the knee been bad?" he asked. "Since spring. No doctor, I had an appointment scheduled. It was canceled. I was told the co-payment hadn't been covered." She said it simply. No accusation. Just the fact. "I see." Ethan looked at the folded paper beneath her hand. "Mama, what are you writing?" She considered him for a long moment. Then she said, "I've been writing things down since about a year ago. Dates, what was said. Who said it? Where is it?" She looked at him. "Do you remember your father's dictionary?" He thought back. A thick blue dictionary, old, the spine repaired with tape twice over the pages, soft with use. His father had used it for the crossword puzzles he did every Sunday morning. After his father died, Dorothy had put it on the bookshelf in the study and never moved it. "The old Webster's," he said. "Inside the back cover," she said. "Behind the binding." He went downstairs. He went to the study. The dictionary was on the third shelf from the top, exactly where he had last seen it, 17 years ago. Still with its taped spine, still with the small sticker his father had put on the front, with his name in block letters in case he ever loaned it out. He pulled it from the shelf. When he opened the back cover, he found the binding had been carefully peeled away from the board at one corner, just the corner neatly without tearing, and behind it were folded sheets of paper. Dozens of them. He removed them carefully. They were dated going back 11 months, each page covered in his mother's measured handwriting. Small notes, precise notes. The kind of notes you take when you've decided that precision is the only power you have left. He sat in his father's chair and read. The first entry read, "Leon told me today that Ethan is having financial difficulties. He asked me not to call and worry you. I am writing this down so I will remember what was said." He read for a long time. Outside the study window, the light was changing. The afternoon was going gray again. He heard Leon and Patricia moving through the house, the refrigerator opening, the television coming on in the living room, the sound of Patricia's shoes on the hardwood. He kept reading. By the 7th entry, he had to put the pages down for a moment. He sat with his elbows on the desk and pressed his knuckles against his mouth and stayed still. His mother had written everything, every instance of being told not to call him. Every instance of the household allowance being reduced. Every conversation in which her memory was questioned. The night she heard Patricia say through a door, "By the time he finds out, it'll all be settled." The morning she went to the park food truck for the first time because there was nothing to eat for lunch. And one entry dated 4 months ago that read, "Patricia took my wedding ring to be cleaned. I wrote it down because I want to remember when she took it. I asked about it again today, and she said it wasn't ready yet." He read the final entry. It was from 3 weeks ago. "I am still waiting for Ethan to come home. I know he's busy. I know how hard he works. I am trying not to be a burden. But I want him to know that I kept a record in case it matters later. In case the truth needs to find its way out somehow. I raised him to know that the truth always matters." Ethan set the pages down carefully. He picked up his phone and called Whitfield. "I found something," he said. "A journal. 11 months of documented entries. Every date, every incident, every name." He paused. She kept it in a dictionary. A brief silence on the other end. "Bring it with you tomorrow," Whitfield said. "Both of you." "Both of us," Ethan said. He looked at the stack of pages on his father's old desk. "Yes." He set the phone down. He sat in the quiet study for another minute. Then he gathered the pages, carefully folded them back the way his mother had folded them, and slid them into the inside pocket of his jacket next to the note that said, "You will know what to look for. I raised you to know." She had raised him well. That night after the house had gone quiet, Ethan sat at the small desk in the guest room with his laptop and 3 years' worth of bank records. He was methodical. He had been methodical for 20 years. It was the quality that had taken him from a rented studio in Seattle with a second-hand server and a business plan printed on a library printer to the position he now held. He applied the same method now that he applied to every financial question: follow the line until it stopped making sense, then start there. The monthly transfers had gone to a business account under the name L. Cole Residential Consulting. Ethan hadn't known the account existed. Leon had told him to send the transfers to the household account, and Ethan had done so and had never questioned the name on the receiving end. That he acknowledged to himself without softening it had been his mistake. From the L. Cole Residential Consulting account, money moved to Coastal Bridge Services, LLC, the shell company he had spotted the night before. Coastal Bridge then sent payments to Leon and Patricia's personal accounts, categorized as management compensation. Additional payments went to a credit card account in Patricia's name only. Ethan found this through a public business filing that listed Patricia as the registered agent of Coastal Bridge. He did the calculation. 3 years, 36 months, $7,500 per month, $270,000 sent. He traced what he could. Roughly $11,000 over 3 years had reached the household in documented form: groceries, utilities, the occasional repair. His mother had received approximately $6,000 in the cash allowance over the same period. The rest, more than $250,000, had circulated through the shell company and out to Leon and Patricia's accounts. He also found a second business registration from 15 months ago. A company called Millbrook Land Partners LLC also registered to Patricia with a filing address that was the same as the Ridgewood Drive property. He looked at the home equity loan document again. It listed the borrower as Dorothy M. Cole, executed by attorney. In fact, Leon D. Cole, under a durable power of attorney dated August of last year. $140,000. Secured against the Ridgewood Drive property. Monthly payments of $912, currently 3 months past due. He ran the numbers. The property's current market value, based on a quick search of comparable sales in the area, was in the range of $380,000 to $410,000. The outstanding loan balance was roughly $130,000. If the bank initiated foreclosure proceedings and moved to a quick sale, Dorothy could lose not only the house, but much of its equity, the inheritance of 30 years, and everything Ethan had invested in it. He closed the laptop at 2 a.m. and sat in the dark. He had grown up watching his mother do math at the kitchen table late at night. Not complex math, just the simple, terrible arithmetic of the working poor, counting what there was and what was needed, and finding the number that remained. He had hated watching her do that math. Everything he had built afterward was so that she would never have to do it again. And while he had been on the other side of the world, someone had put her back at that table. Someone had taken the thing he had built for her and hollowed it out. He didn't sleep. He didn't try. In the morning, he asked Dorothy to come with him. He drove her to Charlottesville himself, with Marcus following in the SUV. He told her they were going to see an attorney. She looked at him once without asking why, and then looked out the window and said, "All right." Whitfield met them in his conference room. He was kind with Dorothy, unhurried, no legal jargon. He asked her to walk him through the past 3 years in her own words. She did so. Her account was consistent with every entry in the journal and with every financial record Ethan had gathered. She had signed the power of attorney on the morning of the third day after her surgery. She remembered signing something, but did not remember the specifics. She had been in significant pain. She had been told it was administrative. Whitfield made notes without expression. Then he opened a file folder and placed several documents on the table between them. Mrs. Cole, I want to ask about this. He pointed to the date of the POA. Do you have any memory of understanding on that day that you were authorizing Leon Cole to borrow money against your home? Dorothy looked at the document. No, she said. I thought I was giving him permission to handle the mail, pay the utilities. He said it was standard while I was laid up. Did anyone explain what durable power of attorney meant? No. Was anyone else in the room when you signed Leon and the notary? A woman I'd never met. Whitfield made a note. Is there any record of who that notary was? There's a stamp on the document, Ethan said. He pointed to the bottom of the page. Whitfield leaned in with his glasses. Barbara Simmons, Notary Public. Whitfield looked up. Simmons. Is that a relative of Patricia Simmons Cole? Ethan looked at the name. He hadn't caught that. He looked at his mother. Do you know a Barbara Simmons? Dorothy thought. Patricia's sister, she said. She came to the house a few times. I didn't know she was a notary. Whitfield set down his pen. The notary is Patricia Cole's sister, he said carefully. That is a significant conflict of interest, and may, depending on the specific circumstances, compromise the notarization. I'll need to verify her notary registration and whether standard protocols were followed. He paused. It also suggests that the preparation and execution of this document was coordinated well in advance by Patricia using a family member to provide the notarization. That speaks to intent. He picked up his pen again and began writing. We'll file an emergency petition to have the POA invalidated on the grounds of incapacity at the time of signing, failure to fully disclose the scope of the document, conflict of interest in the notarization, and undue influence. He looked at Ethan. I'll also file a motion to freeze the home equity lien pending the court's review of the POA's validity and put the holding bank on notice that the instrument used to execute the loan may be legally compromised. Timeline, Ethan asked. Filing by end of week. Emergency hearing scheduled for next week if the judge grants expedited review, and given the foreclosure risk and the elder abuse indicators, I believe they will. He turned to Dorothy. Mrs. Cole, I'll need you to be available for the hearing. You would need to testify. Dorothy looked at the journal pages Ethan had placed on the table. She had not asked how Whitfield got them, she knew. She looked at them with the expression of someone looking at their own handwriting on a wall, recognition, and a kind of quiet relief that the words had made it somewhere. Yes, she said. I can testify. On the drive back to Millbrook, Dorothy was quiet for a long time. She watched the familiar road, valley, and the mountains and the small towns strung along the highway. She had lived her entire life within 30 miles of this road. She knew every curve of it. Are you angry at me? She asked finally. Ethan glanced over. At you, for not calling you, for not making more noise. She looked at her hands in her lap. I kept telling myself it wasn't as bad as it seemed. I kept telling myself to wait a little longer. You kept notes, Ethan said. For 11 months. That's not silence, Mama. It's not calling my son. He drove for a moment without answering. Then I should have visited more. I called. I sent money. I thought that was the same as being here. It's not the same, she said without judgment. No, he agreed. It's not. They drove the rest of the way without speaking, but it was a different kind of quiet. The quiet after you've said the true thing, and both people have heard it. When they arrived at Ridgewood Drive, Leon's car was gone. Only Patricia's sedan sat in the driveway. Ethan helped Dorothy inside, made sure she was settled with tea and her library book, and then stood for a moment in the entrance hall. He looked at the bare wall where his family's photographs had once hung. He looked at the modern furniture that was not his mother's. Then he went to find Patricia. Patricia was in the study. She was at the desk, his father's desk, where Ethan had spent the past 2 nights reading, with a folder open in front of her, and her phone pressed to her ear. When Ethan appeared in the doorway, she said something quickly and ended the call. "Leon isn't here," she said. "I know. I wanted to speak with you." She closed the folder. "Then sit down." He didn't sit. He leaned against the doorframe. "The notary on my mother's power of attorney is your sister." Patricia looked at him without blinking. Barbara is a licensed notary. She's your sister. There's no law against family members providing notarization. There are professional standards around conflict of interest, Ethan said. There are also questions about whether the person being notarized understood what they were signing, and about whether the notary properly verified that. Your mother understood. My mother was 3 days post-surgery on a cocktail of painkillers and muscle relaxants. He paused. The surgical center's standard discharge notes will show her medication protocol. Whitfield will subpoena that. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What is it you actually want, Ethan?" "The truth," he said. "And then I want my mother safe in her own home." "She is in her home. She's in a storage room." Patricia put her palms on the desk and looked at them. When she looked up again, something had shifted in her expression, not toward softness exactly, but toward something more direct. The performance had been set aside. "Leon needed stability," she said. "He has needed stability for a long time. He grew up in this house too. He watched your mother support you, invest in you, celebrate you, and then you left. You made your fortune, and you sent checks. And Leon was here. Still here. Doing the things that don't make headlines." Her voice was controlled but not cold. "That doesn't make what happened right. I'm not saying it's right. But I want you to understand that this wasn't simple greed. It was a long time building." Ethan looked at her. "Is that what this is?" he asked. "An explanation. It's a context. Context doesn't restore the money. It doesn't pay back the loan that's going to take her house. It doesn't explain why she ate from a food truck for 6 months, because you gave her $150 a month and called it sufficient." He straightened. "And it doesn't explain the bruise on her wrist." Patricia said nothing. "The one that looks like someone gripped her arm," Ethan said. Hard, a long silence. "That was an accident," Patricia said finally. "An accident," Ethan said. He let the words stand alone. "All right." He walked out of the study. He was in the kitchen when his phone buzzed. "Whitfield, I have an update," Whitfield said. "I pulled the county property records this morning. There's a second parcel associated with the Ridgewood Drive property, a 1/4-acre adjacent lot your mother owns. Outright, no mortgage, no liens. It's been in her name for 40 years. A pause. "There's a deed of transfer recorded 4 days ago. It transfers that parcel to a Leonard Paul Ferris of Roanoke, Virginia. Mr. Ferris is the first cousin of Patricia Simmons Cole." Ethan stopped walking. "They filed it 4 days ago," he said. "Before you arrived. Possibly in anticipation." Whitfield's voice was even. "It may be that someone knew or suspected you were coming, or it may have been a move they were planning anyway to extract whatever remaining unencumbered value was available before the loan situation escalated. Can we stop it? The transfer is registered but not yet completed. There are county processing requirements that take 10 to 12 days. We have a narrow window. I can file an emergency temporary restraining order this afternoon to freeze the transfer. I need you to authorize it. Authorized, Ethan said. Right now. Whatever you need. Good. I'll file by 3 o'clock. A brief pause. There's something else. I made a call this morning to the Virginia State Bar. Dr. Gerald Marsh, the senior care consultant, who visited yesterday, was licensed as a physician in Virginia until 7 years ago. His license was suspended for 4 months following a patient complaint related to documentation irregularities. He now operates as a care consultant, which doesn't require a medical license. Whatever assessment he produced cannot be entered as a physician's medical evaluation. It lacks the credential basis. Your attorney will take that apart in about 60 seconds. Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter. They brought in someone who couldn't actually testify as a doctor. They may not have known that. Or they may have calculated that the paperwork would be enough to create a record even if it couldn't hold up in court. Whitfield paused. Dr. Nguyen will be at the house tomorrow at 10. Her evaluation will be thorough, and her credentials are unimpeachable. Good. Ethan looked out the kitchen window. The garden was still. Dorothy's small greenhouse sat at the far end of the brick path. He could see from here the row of potted herbs through the glass. What's my position legally? I have standing to do any of this. If the POA is still technically valid, the POA grants authority to Leon, not to you, Whitfield said. But you are her biological son. You are here physically, and you have grounds for an emergency petition to override the POA on her behalf. Additionally, in Virginia, any person can file a complaint of elder financial abuse on behalf of a vulnerable adult. The circuit court can appoint a guardian ad litem to represent your mother's interests during the proceedings, someone the court trusts who is not a family member. A pause. The pattern of conduct here is clear enough that I believe the court will move quickly, especially once that land transfer attempt is in the record, because it shows they were trying to move assets before I could get here. Before anyone could get here, Whitfield confirmed, which shows they knew the conduct was indefensible, which is in evidentiary terms very useful. Ethan ended the call. He stood in the kitchen for a moment. Through the ceiling he could hear the faint creak of someone moving in the upstairs hallway. His mother, probably. The careful, slow movement of a woman favoring a knee that hadn't been treated in 6 months. He could hear distantly Patricia's footsteps in the study. He thought about what she had said. Leon needed stability. He was here while you were gone. He understood why she had said it. He even understood in an abstract way how the resentment had become an entitlement, and the entitlement had become a system, and the system had gone on long enough that everyone inside it had started to believe it was just how things were. He did not find it forgivable. He found a notepad in the kitchen drawer and wrote down everything Whitfield had told him in precise, structured points. Then he put the notepad in his jacket pocket with the journal pages and the hidden note and went upstairs to sit with his mother. Dorothy was at the landing desk again. She had a library book open in front of her, a novel with a blue cover, but she was looking at the window, not the page. When she heard him coming up the stairs, she looked up. "How did it go?" she asked. "Progress," he said. He sat in the chair beside the desk. "There's a hearing next week. You'll need to be there." She nodded slowly. "All right. You'll need to be comfortable testifying about what happened. All of it." She looked at the window. The afternoon light was coming in at a low angle, the kind of slanted autumn light that found dust in the air and made the ordinary room look older and more fragile than it was. "I kept thinking," she said, "that it would sort itself out eventually. That there was some misunderstanding I was missing. That Leon would come around." She paused. He was a difficult child. His father wasn't kind to him before he died. I always tried to give Leon extra patience because of that. I thought that patience was the same as faith. It's not, Ethan said. No, she agreed. It isn't. He reached over and covered her hand with his. Her hand was small and cool. The finger where the ring had been was slightly pale at the base, the skin adjusted to decades of wearing something it was no longer carrying. I'm going to get it back, he said. He didn't explain what he meant. She knew. She looked at her hand. She looked at him. She said, I know you will. He stayed with her until the light through the window had gone fully gray, and then he went back downstairs and began the remaining work of making sure that what was hers could not be taken again. Virginia Osgood knocked on the front door at 8 in the morning before the household was fully awake. She was 67, a retired school librarian who had lived next door since before Ethan was born. She had a wide face and steady eyes, and the particular quality of patience that develops in people who spend their careers surrounded by noise and have learned to be very still inside it. She was holding a manila envelope under one arm. When Ethan opened the door, she said, I've been waiting for you to come home. He stepped back to let her in. She declined coffee and sat at the kitchen table. Margaret, who was already in the kitchen, poured a cup for herself. Leaned against the counter, and stayed. She and Virginia exchanged a glance that suggested they had spoken before. I've been writing things down, Virginia said, since about a year ago, when I realized what was happening. She set the envelope on the table and pushed it toward Ethan. I couldn't convince Dorothy to call you herself. She kept saying she didn't want to be a burden. She kept saying it would resolve on its own. Ethan opened the envelope. Inside was a collection of pages, some handwritten, some photocopies. Dates at the top of each page, the way a careful person records things when they're not sure who will eventually need to read them. He went through them slowly. Virginia had begun observing in October of the previous year. The entries noted the dates on which Dorothy appeared in Virginia's yard or driveway, thin and alone the times of day. Notations about a moving truck that arrived in February and removed several pieces of furniture from the house without Dorothy's visible involvement. Photographs printed on standard office paper, slightly blurry but legible, that showed the side of the house at different points over the year. One photograph was taken at the street level at a distance and showed Dorothy sitting on the porch steps alone in the rain without a jacket. He looked at that photograph for a moment. There are also some photographs of Leon, Virginia said. Near the end of the folder, she touched the edge of the stack. In February, 4 months ago. I followed him. I know that sounds strange. Tell me. I saw Dorothy ask him something at the door. I couldn't hear what. But from the way her hand went to her left hand, and the way he replied quickly and walked away, I had a feeling. Virginia looked at the table. I followed him into town. He went to a pawn shop on Main Street. He was inside for about 20 minutes. She took a photograph from the bottom of the stack and placed it in front of Ethan. It showed Leon leaving the pawn shop, his back partially turned, but recognizable. The timestamp was printed in the corner. The shop's name was visible in the background. I don't know what he sold, Virginia said. But Dorothy's ring was gone the next week. I noticed it when she waved to me from the garden. Ethan picked up the photograph. He turned it over. On the back, Virginia had written the name and address of the pawn shop. Virginia, Ethan said. Why didn't you call the police? She considered this. I thought about it. But what I had wasn't proof of a crime, not clearly. It was observations. A neighbor's observations. She looked at him. What I had was something that made sense to another person who knew what to look for. You. I just didn't have a way to reach you directly. She paused. I wrote to your company's address twice. I don't know if the letters arrived. They didn't reach me, he said. She nodded. I thought as much. He put the photograph down and looked at everything Virginia had assembled. 12 months of careful observation documented the way a librarian documented things consistently, precisely, without embellishment. It was in its quiet way a remarkable act of sustained attention on behalf of a neighbor she was simply not willing to stop watching over. Thank you, he said. He meant it completely. She's been my neighbor for 35 years, Virginia said. She brought me soup when my husband was sick. She stayed with me the night he died. She looked at her coffee cup. That's not a favor you forget. Dr. Rachel Nguyen arrived at 10 o'clock sharp, as Whitfield had said. She was a slight woman in her late 40s, with efficient gestures and the manner of someone who had conducted a very large number of evaluations and had developed through that experience a precise sense of how to put people at ease without performing it. She asked to speak with Dorothy alone for the first portion of the evaluation. Ethan and Margaret waited in the kitchen. Leon had not returned from wherever he had gone. Patricia was in the master bedroom with the door closed. The evaluation took 90 minutes. Afterward, Dr. Nguyen asked to speak with Ethan separately in the living room. She is a sharp woman, Dr. Nguyen said. Cognitively, she is functioning well within normal range for her age. There is some short-term memory variability, absolutely typical for a 71-year-old, and not clinically significant. Her reasoning, executive function, and capacity to understand and make decisions are intact. She paused. She is also in my clinical assessment experiencing a level of chronic stress that has had visible physical effects. Her weight is below what would be appropriate. She is not sleeping well. She told me she has not had a full medical checkup in over a year. The knee, Ethan said. She may have a stress fracture in the left knee. She's been managing it without treatment. I'd like to refer her to an orthopedic specialist immediately. Dr. Nguyen looked at him. She's managing it because she had no money for a copay and was told the issue wasn't serious. Told by whom? She said the household was dealing with a lot. That was all she'd say about it. Dr. Nguyen set her written notes on the table in front of her. I'll have a formal evaluation report prepared by end of week. The findings are unambiguous. There is no clinical basis for a finding of legal incapacity. There's a doctor, a Gerald Marsh, who did a brief evaluation yesterday, arranged by the people currently living in this house. Dr. Nguyen's expression was carefully neutral. I'm familiar with Gerald Marsh's professional history. His evaluation, whatever its conclusions, would not meet the standard required for a legal incapacity determination. He doesn't hold an active medical license. Ethan thanked her. He walked her to the door. On his way back through the entrance hall, he stopped at the foot of the stairs and looked up. Dorothy was at the top, standing at the landing with both hands on the railing. She had put on a proper dress and her good shoes and done her hair. She looked standing there exactly like the woman who had run a school for 20 years. What did the doctor say? She asked. That you're exactly who you've always been, Ethan said. She smiled. Not the forced smile from the park pavilion. A real one. Good, she said, and went back to her room. That afternoon, Whitfield called. The temporary restraining order was granted on the land transfer. The county has been notified to halt processing. A pause. I also received notice that Leon's attorney has filed a response to the preliminary petition, arguing that Dorothy voluntarily and knowingly signed the POA and that it was duly notarized. They've attached a statement from Dr. Marsh supporting the position that Dorothy's cognitive state makes independent decision-making unreliable. Another pause. And this morning, Dr. Marsh called my office to say he would testify on Leon's behalf at the hearing. Ethan was quiet. How concerned should I be, he asked. Not very. His license issues are on the public record. The statement doesn't identify him as a physician, which is the only way it could carry weight. And the quality of his evaluation, no standardized testing instruments, no documented methodology. 15 minutes in a room will not survive cross-examination. Whitfield's voice was measured. But it tells us something. They're not conceding. They intend to fight the hearing, good, Ethan said, and he meant it. He wanted a hearing. He wanted the journal pages and Virginia's photographs and Dr. Nguyen's evaluation and the bank records and the notary conflict of interest, all in the same room in front of the same judge on the record. He wanted his mother to be able to sit in that room and say what she had been prevented from saying for 11 months, and have it entered officially into the account of what had happened. He called Whitfield back 20 minutes later. One more thing. There's a pawn shop on Main Street in Millbrook. I need you to find out if a gold ring was brought in approximately 4 months ago. I have a photograph of the person who brought it. If it's still there, I want to buy it back. Whitfield said nothing for a moment. Then I'll make some calls. Ethan set down the phone. He went back to the kitchen where Margaret was beginning to prepare dinner, actual dinner, with food from the grocery store Ethan had stocked that morning. The smell of onions and garlic and butter filled the room, and it smelled like the house he had grown up in before everything had changed. Dorothy appeared in the kitchen doorway. She stood there for a moment, just watching Margaret at the stove, and something shifted in her face. Some tension releasing some long-held vigilance, letting go just slightly, just at the edges. "Smells good," she said. "It does," Margaret agreed. "Dinner in 45 minutes. Dorothy went to the cabinet where her tea was kept, her tea, in her kitchen, and made herself a cup without asking anyone's permission. It was a small thing. It was not a small thing at all. Leon came back that night at 9:30. He came in through the back door, which Ethan noted, and went directly to the study. Within 3 minutes, the sound of a printer, the household printer, old and slow, started up. It ran for nearly 10 minutes before it stopped. Ethan didn't check what was being printed. He didn't need to. Leon was assembling his own version of the record. What Ethan did do was go to the guest room, call Whitfield's office number, and leave a message. Then he's called Marcus and asked him to be at the house at 7 in the morning. Then he went to sleep. The next morning, Whitfield called before Ethan was fully dressed. 2 things Whitfield said. First, I heard from the pawn shop. A gold ring was brought in approximately 17 weeks ago. Standard women's band, significant wear, consistent with long-term use, engraved inside. The shop owner says the engraving reads RC to DM, November 12, 1979. He still has it. He agreed to hold it pending your call. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Second, Whitfield continued. I received formal notice of a counterpetition filed yesterday by Leon Cole's attorney. He's petitioning the court to appoint him as Dorothy Cole's legal guardian on the grounds of demonstrated cognitive decline. He's using the Marsh evaluation as supporting evidence. Can he get that granted before the hearing? Not quickly. Guardianship petitions require independent investigation and notification of the subject. The court will need to appoint a guardian ad litem, which takes time. But the filing itself is significant. If a judge reads it without the counter-evidence, it creates a damaging first impression. Whitfield's voice was steady. The good news is that the filing triggers a mandatory court notification to your mother, which means she has a legal right to retain independent counsel. And Dr. Nguyen's evaluation, which I filed with the court this morning as part of our response, directly contradicts the guardianship claim. So does the conflict of interest flag on the Marsh evaluation. What do we need for the hearing? We need Dorothy present. We need her to be able to give her account clearly and without obvious distress. We need the bank records. I've filed a subpoena, and the receiving institution has 10 days to produce them. But their compliance department often moves faster when they know fraud is alleged. We need Virginia Osgood's folder formally entered, and we need the journal. That's the cornerstone. She'll be ready, Ethan said. He went downstairs. Leon was already in the kitchen. They had not spoken since Ethan's conversation with Patricia 2 days earlier, and the kitchen now had the atmosphere of two people who had said everything that could be said between them and were waiting for someone else to settle the matter. Ethan made coffee. Leon sat with his phone. Patricia came in and out carrying things from room to room with the industrious energy of someone who is very busy doing things that have no purpose. After a while, Ethan set down his cup and looked at Leon. I found the journal, he said. Leon's phone went still in his hand. 11 months of entries, Ethan continued. Every date, every incident, every conversation. He paused. She's been writing it in the back of Dad's dictionary. Leon said nothing. His face had the expression of a person watching something inevitable approach from a distance, not shocked, not denying it, just watching. The ring, Ethan said. Virginia Osgood photographed you leaving the pawn shop on Main Street 4 months ago. The shop has the ring. The engraving is verifiable. He spoke quietly. There was no point in volume. I'm buying it back today. Leon looked at the table. Patricia from the doorway began. You have to understand. I understand everything, Ethan said. He picked up his coffee cup. The hearing is next Thursday. You should speak with an attorney. He went to the living room. He spent the rest of the morning with Dorothy. They sat on the back porch. It was cold, but the sun was out, and Dorothy had her good coat, the one with the thick lining that she had owned for 15 years and refused to replace because it still worked fine. Ethan told her calmly and completely everything he knew. The financial transfers, the shell company, the loan, the attempted land transfer, the guardianship petition. He told her about the hearing. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a while. Did you know about Coastal Bridge, he asked. The payments? No, she said. I knew there was a company that handled the property. Leon explained it as a management service. I thought you had arranged it. I didn't know it existed. She looked at the garden. The flower beds were overgrown. Now they had needed attention since late summer, and no one had provided it. Dorothy was a careful gardener, the kind who took satisfaction in preparation bulbs planted in October for spring beds cut back before the frost. The fact that the beds were untended said something about how constrained her life had become in the past year. She hadn't had the physical access or the energy to maintain what was hers. I want to testify, she said. Clearly. You will. I want whoever is sitting in that room to understand exactly what happened. Not my feelings about it. The facts. What was done when and by whom. She turned to him. I've been in enough hearings of my own school board meetings, disciplinary panels, to know that facts are what hold up. Feelings are useful, but facts don't bend. Whitfield feels the same way, Ethan said. Good. She adjusted her coat collar. Then we'll be fine. He called Whitfield that afternoon to check on the subpoena for the bank records. Whitfield had already received a preliminary response from the holding bank's compliance department. They were pulling the relevant account histories and would have them available within 5 days. Additionally, the Virginia State Attorney General's office had been notified of the pending elder financial abuse allegations, as required by the filing, and had acknowledged receipt. One more development, Whitfield said. The attorney representing Leon called my office this afternoon. He suggested informally that his clients might be willing to discuss a settlement before the hearing. Ethan was quiet. What kind of settlement, he asked? He didn't specify. He suggested a mutual agreement in which Leon and Patricia agree to vacate the property and the parties forego further litigation. Whitfield paused. He implied that his clients are concerned about the criminal exposure. The fraud claim, the elder abuse referral, those carry potential criminal liability beyond civil recovery. A settlement that doesn't include criminal accountability, Ethan said. Correct. The civil suit would be resolved. The criminal referral would be a separate matter, but the settlement might be used to argue mitigating factors. Ethan thought about this. He thought about his mother writing in the back of a dictionary for 11 months. He thought about the ring. He thought about the bruise. No settlement, he said. We go to the hearing, Whitfield said. All right. The two words had a quality of satisfaction to them that told Ethan he had made the answer Whitfield expected. That evening, as the house settled into its nighttime quiet, Ethan found a box in the garage that the movers had left his mother's old family photographs. They had been placed in bubble wrap and tucked behind a stack of Leon's golf equipment. He unwrapped each frame carefully. His father's face looked up at him from a photo taken at a church picnic in 1983, smiling at something off camera, leaning slightly toward Dorothy, the way he always did in photographs. Ethan rewrapped them carefully and brought the box inside. He didn't rehang them, that would wait properly until the house was fully hers again. But he placed the box in Dorothy's room where she could see it. She was reading when he came in. She saw the box. She set down her book and looked at it for a moment. You found them, she said. In the garage. She nodded once. She didn't open the box. She reached over and put her hand on top of it, the way you hold something you've been without for too long and just wanted to confirm was real. Thursday, she said. Thursday, he confirmed. She picked her book back up. He turned off the hallway light and went to bed, and for the first time since he had landed his private jet in Charlottesville 4 days earlier, he slept through the night without waking. The Millbrook County Circuit Court was a 2-story brick building on the town square, flanked by old oaks that had dropped their leaves by now, their branches bare against a cold November sky. The parking lot held a mix of county vehicles and personal cars, nothing remarkable. A couple leaving the clerk's office held a door open for Dorothy without knowing who she was. Inside the courtroom was small wood paneling, a raised bench, 2 long tables facing the judge's position, spectator benches behind a low railing. It smelled of old documents and floor wax. The fluorescent lights were the same unforgiving kind that Ethan had seen in every administrative room in every county building he had ever visited. Dorothy sat beside Whitfield at the petitioner's table. She was wearing a charcoal blazer she had owned for years, and her reading glasses were on a chain around her neck. She looked like the principal she had been for 22 years, composed, alert, prepared to speak. Ethan sat in the first row of spectator benches directly behind her. Virginia Osgood was on his right. Margaret Price sat 3 seats down, hands folded in her lap, her back very straight. Across the aisle, Leon sat with his attorney, a man named Graves from Charlottesville, hired recently, clearly rushed. Patricia was beside Leon. Neither of them looked at Ethan. The judge entered. The Honorable Patricia Wright, 62, a circuit court judge with 3 decades on the bench. She read the preliminary filings without expression and asked both parties if they were ready to proceed. Both were. Whitfield moved methodically. He entered the financial records first. The bank statements showing Leon's account receiving the monthly transfers. The transactions to Coastal Bridge Services, LLC, the personal disbursements from the shell company to Leon and Patricia's accounts. He entered the home equity loan documents, the POA, and the notary registration showing Barbara Simmons as Patricia's sister. Then he called Virginia Osgood. Virginia took the stand and described in careful and measured language what she had observed over 12 months. She presented her documentation folder, which was entered into evidence. She described following Leon to the pawn shop and producing the photographs. She described Dorothy's increasing isolation and the change in her daily patterns. She answered Leon's attorney's cross-examination questions, several of which attempted to frame her as interfering in a private family matter with patient precision. Leon's attorney called Dr. Marsh. Whitfield objected to his testifying as a medical expert on the grounds that Marsh held no active medical license. The judge sustained the objection. Marsh was permitted to testify only as a lay observer. His account of his visit to the house was brief and stripped of medical authority, carried little weight. Dr. Rachel Nguyen testified next. She presented her evaluation methodology, standardized instruments, full cognitive battery, 45 minutes of directed assessment, and her findings. Dorothy tested within normal range on every significant measure. Dr. Nguyen was specific, thorough, and unmoved by the cross-examination. When Leon's attorney suggested that one-time testing could not rule out a pattern of decline, Dr. Nguyen replied that decline has observable markers, and that Dorothy showed none of them, and that the absence of those markers in a properly administered evaluation was itself clinically meaningful. Margaret Price testified about what she had witnessed in the house over the course of the past year: the reduction of Dorothy's living space, the cash allowance, Dorothy's requests about her missing documents, and the threats against her own employment that had kept her silent. The judge asked several clarifying questions. She was not unkind, but she was precise. She asked about specific dates. She asked Leon's attorney to explain the business purpose of Coastal Bridge Services, LLC. The attorney said he would need time to consult with his client. The judge said that she was asking now. Leon's attorney requested a brief recess. The judge allowed 5 minutes. During those 5 minutes, Ethan watched Leon and his attorney confer at their table in low voices. Patricia sat beside Leon without moving, her hands in her lap, her face closed. Once she looked across the aisle directly at Ethan. He looked back. She looked away first. The recess ended. Leon's attorney said that Coastal Bridge Services was established to consolidate property management functions, and that its compensation structure reflected the scope of services provided. He declined to characterize the specific allocation of funds without further review of accounting records. The judge made a note. Then Whitfield asked Dorothy if she would like to address the court. Dorothy stood. She was small, standing at the railing, but she stood straight. She held 2 pages from the journal in front of her. She had chosen them herself. 2 specific entries she said she wanted read into the record. She read the first. October 14th. Leon told me today that Ethan has been having financial difficulties and cannot send support as he has been doing. He asked me not to call Ethan and worry him. I asked how serious it was. Leon said it was temporary. I wrote this down because I want to remember exactly what was said on what day by whom. She looked up once briefly and then back at the page. She read the second. March 3rd. There was nothing in the kitchen for lunch. I went to the park and had a meal from the community truck. The woman there is very kind. I came home and sat in the garden for a while. I wrote a note to Ethan, sealed it, and gave it to Margaret to keep. I want him to know if something happens to me and he comes looking that I kept a record. Because that is what you do when you know you are right and you need the truth to outlast the moment. The courtroom was quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. Leon looked at the table in front of him. The judge made notes for almost a full minute after Dorothy finished. Then she looked up. She began with the POA. Given the notary's familial relationship to one of the primary beneficiaries of the document, which represented in the court's view a material conflict of interest, and given the documented post-surgical medication protocol on the date of signing which created reasonable doubt as to Dorothy Cole's full understanding of the document's scope, the durable power of attorney was declared legally void and without effect as of this proceeding. She moved to the home equity loan. Since the loan had been executed under the authority of a now voided instrument, the court would issue an order requiring the lending institution to freeze further action on the loan pending a complete fraud review. The court would refer the matter to the Virginia Attorney General's Consumer Finance Division. She ordered Leon and Patricia Cole to vacate the Ridgewood Drive property within 72 hours. She issued a referral to the Millbrook County Sheriff's Office Financial Crimes Unit for investigation of financial elder abuse. She asked Whitfield to file a formal civil recovery claim on behalf of Dorothy Cole within 30 days. She noted for the record that Dr. Marsh's evaluation submitted by the respondent could not be accorded medical evidentiary weight due to the evaluator's inactive license status, and that accordingly, the respondent's guardianship petition lacked sufficient foundation and was dismissed without prejudice. She thanked Dorothy for her statement. Court was adjourned. Leon's attorney spoke to him quietly. Leon nodded once slowly and did not look up from the table. Patricia gathered her things with the careful movements of a person keeping their composure through concentration. She walked past Ethan without speaking. At the door of the courtroom, she stopped. She turned back. Ethan met her gaze. "You destroyed this family," she said. Her voice was flat. He looked at her for a moment. "You were destroying it for 3 years," he said. "I just made it visible." She walked out. Virginia was squeezing Dorothy's hand at the petitioner's table. Margaret was crying quietly into a tissue. Dorothy was sitting very still with both hands folded on the table in front of her, looking at nothing in particular, breathing slowly. The judge's clerk was gathering documents nearby. Everything about the room was ordinary and procedural, and the most important thing that had happened in it had taken less than an hour. Ethan came through the railing gate. He sat beside his mother. She looked at him. "That's it?" she asked. "That's the beginning of it," he said. "The civil case will take longer. But this, the house, the POA, the freeze, this is done." She nodded. She looked at her hands. She looked at the empty table across the aisle where Leon had been sitting. "He was a difficult child," she said again, quietly, as she had said before. "And then just as quietly, he became a difficult man. And I spent too long being sorry for him." She paused. "I'm not sorry anymore." Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into it slightly, not heavily, not with the weight of someone defeated, but with the natural lean of someone who had been carrying something alone for too long and could finally reasonably put a little of it down. Outside, the November sun was low and bright. The oaks threw long shadows across the courthouse steps. Marcus had brought the car around. Virginia walked close to Dorothy on the steps, not touching her, just present. It was a cold day, and the light was short, and the year was nearly done. But on the steps of the Millbrook County Circuit Court, on a Thursday in November, it felt like something had ended, that needed to end, and something else slower and quieter and more permanent was beginning in its place. Leon and Patricia were gone by Friday afternoon. They took their clothes, their electronics, the modern furniture Patricia had selected, and very little else. The movers they hired were fast and professional, and spoke to no one in the house. Leon did not speak to Dorothy before he left. He passed her in the hallway once on his way to carry a box to the elevator, and he stopped for half a second, just half a second, and looked at her. She looked back. He picked up the box and continued down the hall. Patricia did not come downstairs at all. When the last car left the driveway, Margaret stood at the kitchen window, watching until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then she turned and said, "Coffee, please," Dorothy said. The house had a different quality after they left. Not emptier, lighter. The way a room feels when you remove something heavy that had been so gradually placed that you'd stop noticing the weight. Ethan spent the first day doing practical things. He called the bank holding the home equity loan and gave them Whitfield's contact information and the court order. He arranged for the lock on the master bedroom door to be rekeyed so that the only copies were in Dorothy's hands. He called the orthopedic practice Whitfield had recommended and made Dorothy an appointment for the following week, the earliest available. And they had moved something for her when he explained the situation. He called the pharmacy and arranged to have Dorothy's prescriptions properly filled at the correct dosage at no cost to her until the civil recovery proceedings had concluded. Then he went to the pawn shop on Main Street. The owner, a man in his 50s named Curtis with reading glasses on a beaded chain, very similar to Dr. Nguyen's, pulled the ring from a velvet tray in the back cabinet without being asked twice. He set it on a small cloth on the glass counter. It was plain gold, worn thin in the way that rings get when they've been worn every day for decades, with the kind of low shine that comes not from polish, but from the accumulated contact of a life. On the inside of the band, very small, were the engraved letters IRC to DM, November 12, 1979, Robert Cole to Dorothy May. His parents had been married for 11 years before his father died. His father had been 43. His mother had been 41. She had worn the ring for 30 more years after that. Ethan bought it back, paid more than the appraised value, and drove home. He went upstairs. Dorothy was in her bedroom, her actual bedroom, the master room. He had had it repainted in the days since the hearing, a warm cream color instead of the cold white Leon and Patricia had chosen. He had had her furniture moved back up from the garage. Her photographs were on the dresser. His father's portrait was back on the wall above the reading chair. She was sitting in that chair when he knocked. She looked up from her book. He held out the velvet box. He didn't explain. She knew what it was. She took it. She opened it. She looked at the ring for a long moment without speaking. Then she put it on. She held her hand up and looked at it the way you look at something you thought was gone. The fit was still perfect. The gold was still warm. "Thank you," she said. He sat in the chair across from her. The afternoon light came through the two large windows and fell across the floor in wide, quiet bands. Outside, the garden was still overgrown, but Margaret had already begun working on the beds. Ethan had seen her out there in the morning, with pruning shears moving along the fence, with the unhurried efficiency of someone who was doing what needed to be done, and found satisfaction in doing it properly. "The orthopedic appointment is Tuesday," Ethan said. "I know. Margaret reminded me twice." "Good," he smiled. "She's going to drive you. You're not staying." "I need to go back to Seattle Tuesday morning," he said. "There's a board meeting Wednesday that I can't move." He paused. "But I'm coming back the following weekend. And then the one after that." She looked at him over her reading glasses. "That's too much. You'll exhaust yourself. I'll manage. Ethan, Mama." He said it gently but completely. "Please let me manage it." She looked at him for a moment. Then she took her glasses off and folded them in her lap. "All right," she said. That evening, Virginia came for dinner. It was a simple meal. Margaret made pot roast, the kind that needed several hours, and filled the house with the smell of it. And the four of them ate at the kitchen table: Dorothy, Ethan, Virginia, and Margaret, who had eaten in the kitchen since before Ethan was born, and who Ethan insisted join them, and who sat down after only minor protest. They talked about small things: Virginia's garden and how it had done this season, Margaret's youngest daughter, who had started her first job that fall and called home every Sunday, the documentary Dorothy had watched recently about birds of the Appalachian Range and what she had learned from it. Nobody talked about the hearing. Nobody talked about Leon. The absence of those subjects was itself a kind of relief. The relief of an evening in which what mattered was not what had happened, but what was happening now, which was four people at a table in the light eating together. After dinner, Dorothy and Virginia sat on the back porch with their coffee wrapped in coats against the cold. Ethan and Margaret cleared the table in the kitchen. Through the window, he could see the two women, Dorothy's white hair, Virginia's gray, the two of them sitting close together, the way old friends do, not touching, not looking at each other, particularly just present in each other's company in the way that requires no performance. He washed the pot roast pan. Margaret dried it and put it away in the cabinet where it belonged. In the morning, Ethan sat with Dorothy in the garden. It was cold. They were both in coats. The sky was pale and high and clear in the way that Virginia skies get in late autumn when the weather has decided for the moment to simply be still. Dorothy had a pair of pruning shears in her lap and was working along the edge of the flower bed near the porch, cutting back the dead growth from the summer. "You don't have to do that today," Ethan said. "I've been wanting to do it since August," she said. "I'll do it today." He watched her work. Her left knee was troubling her, but she managed it, shifting her weight, taking her time. The shears made a clean, regular sound against the dry stalks. "I want to set up automatic oversight," Ethan said. "Direct account for your expenses. No intermediary. A financial advisor in Charlottesville who Whitfield recommends. I'd see a monthly statement. You don't need to monitor me. I'm not monitoring you. I'm making sure no one can ever do what Leon did again. It's not about trust. It's about structure." She considered this. She made a cut and set the clipping aside. "All right," she said. "But I want to be part of the conversations with the advisor. I don't want things managed around me, of course. I had a career," she said. "I managed a department budget. I would like to still be consulted about my own finances." "Absolutely," he said. "That's the point." She made another cut. A small bird landed on the fence behind the garden and regarded them briefly before deciding they were uninteresting and flying away. "I'm not angry at you," she said. "Not for the first time, but with a different quality now. For not knowing. For trusting him. You could be. I'm choosing not to be." She set down the shears and looked at him. "We both made mistakes. Me for waiting too long to say something. You for staying too far away too long." She picked the shears back up. "Those are things we correct going forward, not things we carry." He didn't say anything. He watched her work. The garden was beginning to look like itself again. The places she had cut back were cleaner now, the shape of the bed visible beneath the overgrowth. At the airport on Tuesday morning, she stood at the curb and held his hands for a moment before he went inside. She was wearing the ring. He could feel it against his palm. "Come back soon," she said. "Next weekend," he said. "I promise." She squeezed his hands and let go. He went through the doors. He didn't look back until he was at the gate, and when he looked back through the terminal window toward the curb, she was already gone. Margaret had driven her away. She had other things to do. She had her own life to return to now. He boarded his flight to Seattle. The plane was not a private jet this time, a commercial flight quicker to book, and he hadn't minded. He sat in the window seat and watched Virginia drop below the clouds as they climbed. He thought about her at the table with the journal pages, about the dictionary with his father's name on the label, about the ring going back on her finger without ceremony, without explanation, without needing either. He thought about what she had said in the garden. "Those are things we correct going forward, not things we carry." He believed her. He would try. If you've ever had someone in your life who gave everything quietly, who never asked for help until it was almost too late, call them. Not because something might be wrong, just to be sure that it isn't.